So Haas came into this weekend posting a picture of a bottle of champagne. I don't know about you, but that's f***ing optimistic, isn't it?
That's rude.
Hey there guys, I'm Will and welcome to the Comedy Review, the show that is doing for comedy what RPM is doing for female representation in motorsports. Don't worry, I'm sure F1 Academy can redeem themselves this weekend. Oh, never mind, they're too busy checking each other's colons. It's also the show where we talk about things that happen in motorsport. Things like this. Oscar Piastri tries anal, Fernando Alonso declares war on the Dolphins, and the Mercedes drivers sum up my experience last year on the Comedy Review.
We'll probably get told off for the copyright, but who cares?
And a lot more to come, but we start here. It's everyone's favourite Miami sprint this weekend, but we've got a hell of a lot of news to cover before that. Most importantly, we've got the Haas F1 team, who used their first home race of the season to visit a children's hospital and smother them with merch, because apparently those poor souls haven't suffered enough. From dying kids to whatever the opposite of that is, Max Verstappen is a daddy now. Reactions to this being surprisingly mixed. Toto Wolff was full of praise for the Dutchman. Meanwhile, Team LH had an aneurysm for some reason. Christian Horner jumped straight to comparing the newborn to a horse. And then there was Yuki Tsunoda.
Hey, Big Daddy.
Yeah, I don't really know what we expected with that one. On the other side of the globe were Madrid, who were screaming from the rooftops because they've built the first part of their car park, which will host the Spanish Grand Prix from next year. Alongside this came a video demonstration of what the completed circuit would look like, filling us with confidence as we watched them unable to get around their own track. Quite a lot of pointless news then, pretty much in theme with this weekend, and it continues as apparently it's time for everyone to have a Netflix documentary all of a sudden. Formula E premiered their new Driver series, which is unlike nothing you've ever seen before. Kimi Antonelli gets a new show called The Seat, though I was kind of hoping for a few more angles of Toto Wolff's glory hole underneath it, and even F1 Academy gets in on the action. Their rundown of the 2024 season rivaling the view count of my new podcast, which you should really check out, but apparently no one cares. Continuing with more bad news, and before cars had even got out onto track, it was announced that Miami had signed a new deal to stay on the F1 calendar until 2041. Let's round this up then by looking ahead to all the special liveries on display this weekend. Sauber kicking us off by drenching their car in Shrek Seaman, a design only slightly worse than Mercedes' effort, which was so embarrassingly bad they only put it on the F1 Academy car. It was time for VCarb to say hold my pink then, as they released the livery that caused Shrek to produce that Sauber in the first place. Regular viewers of the channel will know my thoughts on pink liveries, but this one hits different for some reason. Let's return back to Earth then, by means of Space Shuttle Columbia, by seeing what Ferrari have cooked up this weekend. The Scuderia caused havoc this time last year, heavily teasing a blue livery for the Miami weekend, then rocking up in whatever the fuck this was. The Prancing Horses tried to pull the same stunt this year, achieving the impossible as they managed to somehow make it even worse.
It's a beautiful livery.
No, it isn't, you fucking Spanner. I was gonna say spanner. Lewis Hamilton's helmet got similar treatment in some strange tribute to ex-Caterham driver Marcus Ericsson, though at least it sums up the Britain's pace at the moment. Lando Norris was another to bring a special helmet to this race, his Miami designs all emulating different types of balls. Good to complement the giant bell end in the driver's seat then, I guess. This year it was the turn of the disco ball, which almost burnt the Briton's eyes out as he tried showing it off to some fake F1 fans in the Miami paddock. I'm still waiting for the McLaren driver to run out of ideas though, and turn up to the 2041 event dressed up as a fucking scrotum. Just a singular practice session then, and Lando Norris would run into problems immediately, forced to come back into the pits after the team elected to leave a variety of tools in the Britain's cockpit. Unfortunately, they sent the 4-car back out, with the biggest one still left inside. Alex Albon was having issues of his own, complaining over the radio about the Mercedes cars being too slow. And God, I really hope that doesn't come back to bite him later in the weekend. Still, could be worse. You could be Ollie Behrman. The Briton had been learning how to make bagels before the weekend, which are basically just forms of donuts, aren't they? Anyway, here he is trying one of those to minimal success early in the session. The other Haas wasn't faring much better, Esteban Ocon doing his best to give that children's hospital another visit in the form of Lando Norris. It would be the other McLaren of Oscar Piastri taking top honours ahead of sprint qualifying though, his boss celebrating by drinking some tyre water, a not so subtle callback to Red Bull's accusations from last year, and something I'd recommend all McLaren fans to try at some point. Apparently the best way to get some is by laying your head right onto the wheel of a car, and it tastes even better if said car is moving over 30 miles per hour. Anyway, Leclerc and Verstappen would make up the top 3, and an impressive showing from the Williams squad allowed Sainz and Albon to complete the top 5. It It's also been a while since we mentioned Special. He was down in P20. Speaking of the Canadian, Stroll was saved by the fact that the 4 cars behind him in SQ1 were f***ing useless and couldn't get around in time to set their final laps, and he still went out anyway when Hadjar improved. One of the cars unable to make the line was latest Red Bull sacrifice Yuki Tsunoda. The Japanese hotshot held up by another driver, which was fine because said other driver was Max Verstappen. Jack Doohan was another one slightly displeased by the acts of his teammate, Pierre Gasly unveiling new force powers that prevented the 7 car from turning out into the pit lane. Careful there, Jack, you almost... Nico Hulkenberg was the star of SQ2. I mean, he still went out, but dragging Shrek's entrails to P11 is worthy of a shout-out in my book. Carlos Sainz wasn't so lucky, taking his Williams' good form on a scenic tour of the Miami runoff area. We were all ready for SQ3 then, McLaren looking like the favourites, but also Max Verstappen in the mix. Neither of those would end up on pole though, after Kimi Antonelli pulled out an absolute barnstormer of an effort to become the youngest pole sitter in Formula 1 history. So much of a shock to the Italian that he had to be undressed by the FIA officials when he got back to the pits. Toto Wolff already appears to have had a meltdown coming into this weekend. Now he has to watch his new favourite cumsock leave the sprint from the front. Only this was Miami, and things wouldn't be that simple. Let's start off Sprint Saturday with a Ferrari moment. This sure looks like the conditions for full wets, doesn't it? Well, not according to Charles Leclerc, who on his reconnaissance lap to the grid managed to crash onto the f***ing straight. Seeing this, and considering what happened in Jeddah, Red Bull felt it safer to force Yuki Tsunoda to start from the pit lane. Though, as the 19 remaining drivers got running, it became clear that God's impromptu piss was going to be more of a problem than they thought. Even reigning world champion Max Verstappen was running into issues, slipping on some of Kelly's leftover vaginal fluid on the formation lap. That clearly meant we couldn't start the race, and so I'll just play the f***ing meme already. As the cars lined up in the pit lane, fans were able to kill time by wanking over Carlos Sainz and listening to Sky Sports expert pundits argue over whether or not this race had even started. Eventually it was decided that it had, but also hadn't, and when the 20 fastest pussies had deemed enough water had evaporated, we got to the 5 red lights and Kimi Antonelli demonstrated he'd studied at the Lando Norris school of starting from pole. The Italian got the worst launch out of those on the front row and skid off the road at the first corner, coming over the radio to claim he'd been pushed off in an incident that wasn't even worth the FIA noting down. As Piastri took over the lead then, questions began to arise over the legality of a start further back. Max Verstappen was caught outside of his pit box, almost identical to the situation he caught Captain Bottle for at the Bahrain Grand Prix. Norris got a 5-second penalty then. Max Verstappen, no further action. We do love good old FIA consistency. This left Kimi defending from the other silver arrow of George Russell, who was on the radio to tell his team that he had a lot more pace. Subtle code for let me ahead of my teammate. Mercedes replying, copy that, George. Subtle code for shut the f*** up. Surprisingly, no one stacked it on the opening lap, so instead we got to watch the battle of mid, Sainz versus Ocon, as the Spaniard continued his quest to learn how to brake properly. I won't lie though, at this stage the sprint started to settle down, and we began to wonder if Miami was so shit, even the rain couldn't make things interesting. Said rain was beginning to dry, however, and by lap 12, the first cars were experimenting switching onto the dry compound of tyre. Max Verstappen would opt for the mediums and a downforce upgrade, courtesy of Kimi Antonelli and Red Bull Diversity hiring the blind for their 2025 pit crew. And as Toto Wolff beat himself to death with his own skateboard, there was further chaos on track. Carlos Sainz massacring his left rear, wiping the Williams driver out of contention. That left the McLaren team in a precarious position. They'd left both cars out and now seemingly had to sacrifice one by leaving them out on the intermediates for yet another lap. Given Lando was more likely just to bottle it anyway, favour went to leader Piastri. Though, as all hope looked lost for his teammate, Liam Lawson's Spanish racism would kick in, sending the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso into the wall and bringing out the safety car. That gifted Norris with the free pit stop he needed, the 4 car emerging just ahead of Piastri in second. And with the FIA fulfilling their job of neglecting fans from a good finish, we got to watch the slowest clean-up operation in F1 history, the race ending under yellow and Norris taking a jammy win in Miami. Yet again. Hamilton would complete the top 3, having passed the cripple just before shit hit the fan, and speaking of Verstappen, his attempt to recreate my favourite video of all time left him with a 10-second time penalty, which was enough to drop the Dutchman to last and make this the first time since 2016 the Red Bull driver has finished the race outside the points. That's kind of wild, come to think of it. Hats off to Alex Albon though, who benefited from all this to inherit a P4 for Williams, or never mind, he's been penalised for driving too slowly. In fact, the stewards were on a bit of a warpath with this one, as Lawson got 5 seconds for his terrorist attack on Alonso, and Behrman fell out of the points for an unsafe release that wasn't relevant enough to show on the main feed. This was also a 5-second penalty compared to Verstappen's 10, because, once again, consistency. Now I have to eat my words and congratulate Special for somehow ending up in P5 after all of that. And on the subject of Special, here's our ex-bell end of the week. Well, we're back to the norm. Welcome back, Lando Norris fans. You cannot call Lando a lucky driver today, lol. He was just there at the right moment at the right time. Congratulations, you've just described the definition of the word lucky, which can also be attributed to the fact that your sperm was the one to miraculously reach the egg. This sentiment was echoed by most of the comments under this one, and while usually I go over my favourites here, the replies had about as much personality as, well, Lando Norris, I'm not going to lie. Instead then, I'm pleased to report that our hard work is finally paying off, and the war against the Norris stands has begun. F you, FP1 Will, you need to grow up. This was in reply to a fellow Lando fan who appears to be considering doing us all a favour. Here's another quote for you. But plus his take aged terrible, so Landon will win in Jeddah. What was that about aging terribly again? Big thank you to Max Verstappen's burner for bringing the original tweet to my attention, and if you'd like to nominate our next Expel End of the Week, use the hashtag on screen, tag me on the platform, or join our Discord server. Now let's get to Grand Prix qualifying. Oh look, a fatal car accident. Saturday would also see a special launch event by the new Cadillac team, dropping a 90-second teaser that told us absolutely nothing, and then whatever the this was. Yeah, I've got nothing either. Ollie Behrman was paying attention though, going out in Q1 one more time. He joined Special on the back row, the biggest shock of the opening session being Gasly falling into the drop zone, Flavio's script seemingly getting mixed up in the post. Meanwhile, in the city of Copium, Lewis Hamilton fans have clung to the stat that Lewis Hamilton has always made it to Q3 as a Ferrari driver. Well, I'm just getting reports now that the city of Copium has just been nuked by the Britain's incompetence. As he watched his former team book themselves a place in Q3, it was once again time to place your bets on which McLaren driver would take pole position for Sunday's race. Only once again, that didn't happen. Norris and Piastri would come close, but no one could stop Max Verstappen, proving that despite everything in the last week, he's the daddy once again. Those aren't my words, those are the words of David Croft, aired on live f***ing television. Please can someone shoot me in the head. Race day then, but before that, LEGO F1 cars, as the drivers took to the track in life-size versions of the Speed Champion sets, fitted with electric motors and capped at 20 miles per hour. Sorry, did I just say that sentence out loud? No, this did actually happen, complete with Haas still being shit, Doohan showing off his massive schlong, and Norris bottling a potential podium after contact with an Alpine, in what was secretly a test of the new 2026 power unit regulations, so I really hope you enjoyed this one. In the end, after a very long run down to the final braking zone, it was Mercedes versus Ferrari, and apparently the crowd are more interesting, thank you Formula 1. Oh, there we go, the Haas has broken down, and Russell and Sainz are in the wall. Well, that's a win for Doohan's massive schlong then. Now let's get to the actual Grand Prix. With dark clouds in the air then, the lights would go out and Norris would take the fight to Verstappen down into turn 1. I'm just going to leave this here in case we need it. As a matter of fact, we wouldn't, though Lando would still find himself bullied into the runoff, Verstappen getting away with this, making the Norris Twitter fans suicidal, and you know what, that might just be a good thing. Further back, there'd be more drama as Doohan's massive schlong penetrated Liam Lawson without the Kiwi's consent, turning the Alpine into a glorified tricycle and bringing out the virtual safety car. We went back to green on lap 4, Verstappen leading the way with Piastri on the move past Antonelli. It was also at this point that the Sky Sports team remembered this was Miami, and so it was time to bring up some imaginary rain to keep their viewing figures healthy. That might not have been necessary, as the McLaren pair were continuing to put on a show. Norris now passed Russell as Piastri began to size up Verstappen for the lead. That gave us a cracking battle between the pair, Max putting up a great fight until he took the Norris line into turn 1. I know Lando didn't actually lock up here, that's just the phrase I'm using when someone utterly f***s it, by the way. Speaking of Lord Nozza, now it was his turn, and the Briton was quick to show off why Oscar is leading the championship and why Lando is currently at risk of losing second. The Williams pair were having a battle of their own, Albon suffering from a pressure issue, which kinda sums his last year up, and Sainz risking picking up a penalty for racing his own teammate. Further back, a new battle of mid was forming, this time Ocon finding a new friend in Lewis Hamilton. So remember that rain that was prophesied back on lap 4? Well, guess what's happened to just miss the circuit? That meant it was time for frontrunners to stop murdering their tyres and come into the pits. Ollie Behrman's Haas wasn't quite feeling this, however, and instead offered to brain itself and bring out yet another virtual safety car. That granted the McLarens a free pit stop, not that they needed ended it, and Mercedes Russell benefiting too, moving up into third, which I'm sure pleased Max Verstappen immensely. The only people less happy than the Dutchman was likely the Sauber fans, as Gabriel Bortoleto pulled over. Given none of them exist, the next least happy person was probably Lewis Hamilton, on better tyres but stuck behind teammate Charles Leclerc. Lewis was on the radio asking to be let through, though sadly the pit wall was still operating on Windows Vista, the Briton receiving his first iconic "We'll come back to you" of 2025. It took 3 laps for the team to finish their software update, by which point Hamilton's tyre advantage had the longevity of the Pope, and the disgruntled 7-time world champion was making his feelings heard over the team radio. To the surprise of no one then, Lewis wasn't able to get anywhere up the road, and soon enough it was Charles Leclerc's turn to moan to the pit wall, stealing Hamilton's "My tyres are dead" catchphrase from him. The Scuderia thus told Charles that they would revert the positions, only this didn't happen. Had Hamilton finally gone rogue? No, they'd just forgotten to tell him about it. I don't need to add jokes in here because Ferrari just like to write them for me. When Lewis was finally informed and the move was made, he was then told of the threat of sights behind. #Blair's coming out with the utterly brilliant, "Do you want me to let him pass too?" You know what, he may be washed, but he's welcome to host the comedy review for me if he fancies it. Let's return to the leading pair then, Lando Norris putting on a late challenge to try and take the fight back to Piastri in front, which might just be the funniest thing I've said in this review, as Oscar managed the gap in the closing stages to take his 3rd win on the bounce, the first time a McLaren driver has managed the feat since I was less than a simple fetus. A commanding drive yet again from the Australian, and shout out to Williams as well. Albon coming home 5th, and at least at time of recording, not under investigation this time. Same can't be said for his teammate, who was a naughty boy onto the yellows and also tried using Lewis Hamilton as an exterior brake pedal in the final lap of the Grand Prix. Also props to Martin Brundle, who called Zach Brown a Lego brick after the race. I'm personally envisioning this one. Anyway, my thoughts on the Grand Prix? Pretty good, considering this was Miami and I've literally just uploaded an entire podcast episode saying it's the epitome of shit. I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. Good racing in the first half, though could really have done with that rain at the end. Let me know your rating down in the comments below. Next up, we head to a European triple header before jumping back to Canada, because who cares about being net zero by 2030? We've got a week off before that, but don't you worry, we've got plenty of IndyCar to cover, including today's race at Barber, which will receive its comedy review treatment tomorrow. So if you're not already, make sure you're subscribed for all of that. Big thank you to the patrons who got a sneak preview of this video early and get exclusive content nowadays. I'm also planning some things for the summer over there, so if you want to hear more from me, go check that out using the links in the description below. Also check out the latest episode of Talk Shift while you're at it, even if half of you don't care about that apparently. Right, I'm now off to bed, so until IndyCar tomorrow, off.